Large group teaching typically refers to teaching through the medium of a lecture. The benefits of large group teaching is that you can disseminate subject material to a large number of students in a relatively short space of time. However, there are many limitations to a lecture in that it is more difficult to satisfy the learning needs of individuals within the cohort. So how can we as educators minimize these negatives to maximize the student experience? Firstly, let's think about how to structure a lecture. The general structure of a lecture is as follows. Firstly, the title slide and personal introduction. This may be a nice time to briefly outline your personal interests and why you're teaching the subject. Secondly, outline of the session and learning objectives. This is an important part of the session as it lets the students know what to expect from the lecture, your plan, and what they should learn by the end. Try to keep to 3 or 4 key topics within an hour so the lecture isn't rushed. This is a good time to inform students that your lecture will outline the key areas of learning, but they should build upon this in their own time. Signpost to external resources to aid in this endeavour, which will be listed at the end of the lecture. Introduce the topic. Give a brief synopsis of the topic and explain why this topic is important. Next comes the main lecture, working your way through the learning outcomes. It is important to utilise a variety of strategies to keep students engaged in the session, some of which will be outlined later in this video. Following the main lecture, it might be a good time for a quiz. Having a short quiz serves multiple purposes within a large group session. It engages the students at the end of the session, for which their attention may be at its lowest. It allows students to benchmark their learning and also allows you as the educator to ascertain if you've achieved your objectives. With the advent of learning technologies, there are many ways to conduct a quiz, which we have linked a few in the module. To finish off the lecture, you need to provide a summary. This is good practice to summarise the key points to enable students to focus their further learning. Invite the students to ask any questions at this point, and if they would want any areas clarifying face to face. It can be quite intimidating asking questions in front of a large audience, so perhaps take questions after the session has been completed. In large groups, students are generally passive in the learning process, and therefore attention wanes quickly. Engagement in the lecture is dependent on the students' ability to follow the content being taught and being active learners in the session. Here are some strategies to actively engage students in the learning process. Breaking up the session into manageable chunks of no more than 20 minutes allows students to remain engaged within the session. To do so, you could utilise break-off groups of 2 or 3 students to discuss a posed question and then get them to report back afterwards. Questioning can be a useful tool when employed in an open learning environment. Perhaps have all the students put their hands up or stand up and then put their hands down or sit down if they disagree with the posed question. This prevents singling out of students. Technology can be very effective to actively engage students through online quizzes. This also allows students to be anonymous, which promotes participation. Finally, giving resources to students prior to and following the session allows students to engage better with the lecturer. The student's ability to follow the content can be optimized by your delivery of the session and the accompanying resources. Most commonly, a PowerPoint presentation. In your delivery of the session, think about the pacing of your lecture. It is common to be nervous before a lecture, so you may speak more quickly. Try and keep your pacing to 60 to 100 words per minute, which may feel slow, but allows students to follow. Another factor that might affect your pacing is the amount of content you've got to cover. Only having 3 or 4 key topics will be optimal so you're not rushing through the content. In designing your accompanying presentation, there are a couple features which will maximise student benefit. Firstly, keep your slides simple. Putting too much text on a slide is overwhelming for students. With modern lecture capture technology, filling slides with content is no longer necessary, as students can listen to the session in their own time. If the lecture isn't being recorded, perhaps provide supplementary notes to elaborate on your slides. Another consideration is the amount of slides you have. 1 slide a minute should be maximum for a lecture, as any more appears rushed. So in summary, large group teaching can be a useful tool to disseminate information to a large group quickly, but is limited by not addressing individual learning needs and less actively engaging for the students. Think about integrating some of the strategies provided. This may improve your engagement in your future large group teaching session.